Hi.
Hi, Molly.
Hello.
Oh, that's fun. Let's see. Okay, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yay! And we can
Also,
hear
I can hear
you.
myself as well.
Okay, let's see what we can do about that. We could try. Maybe. Okay, let's see. Is it still
Let's
really
see.
echoey?
Still hear myself. I mean, it's not the worst.
Okay. Okay. All right, we are gonna fiddle with some stuff.
Okay.
Let's see. Do you feel like you've sufficiently fiddled, Sam? I do. Okay. Is that any better, Molly?
Let's see. I can still hear a huge echo. It's not really annoying for you guys.
Could you turn Molly down a little bit? Yeah, maybe that'll help. Or there's like some.
Would it help if I moved a microphone? I will cut you.
All right, I think we're. Is that what you would like?
Yes.
Even though last time the headphones made it worse?
The headphone mic made it worse.
I mean, presumably they would speak into a headphone mic.
Let's find out.
Okay, we're gonna give it a try. If it's annoying, Sam seems to think it might be better for you through headphones.
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
Is it still? It's the echo's gone on our end. I don't know if it's gone on your end.
Um, I can hear it on my end. It doesn't bother me as long as it's not a problem for you guys.
Yeah, we need headphones.
Okay, headphones. Sam says, if that's possible. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay. One second.
But we're starting from a place where we can all hear each other, and that is a good place to start. And not always where we start, so that's exciting. Let's see if this helps. Why?
I feel like I should be out of range, but I'm not. No.
If you'd like to more specifically.
Okay, I have headphones on now.
Okay. Does that feel like it helped?
Um, it's a little echoey for me still. So sorry.
No, not you. Don't have to be sorry at all. Are you? Is that
It sounds good on our end now.
okay? Is that beyond your control?
I think so.
Okay. We
Okay.
are gonna try it if that's okay, and then if you're like, this is too annoying, we will. I don't know. Apparently, click some other toggle buttons. I don't know what any of them mean, but Sam probably does.
Oh, well, noise.
It's all good. Yeah, no. Let's do it like this. Very happy to be here. Yeah.
Thank you. We're so happy to have you. Thank you for joining us in our queer book club in our little queer comic shop in Baltimore. We are so very excited to see your lovely face and talk to you about The Deep Dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you mind starting by just sharing a little bit about yourself and sort of your journey into comics?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you guys have a queer book club and a queer comic shop. That's so cool. Can you still hear me also? It just cut out for me. Okay. This is so annoying. If you can hear me, I'll talk. No, okay. So I'm Molly. The Deep Dark came out a couple months ago. Oh gosh.
We can hear you.
You can still hear me. Okay, I just can't see you all. It's totally fine. Yeah, so I'm a graphic novelist. I started about 10 years ago, a little more, actually, more like 12 years, by publishing a webcomic called Strong Female Protagonists with my friend who wrote it, and I drew it. We just sort of threw pages up online. And from there, I realized that I wanted to make my own stories and tell stories that were like specifically mine that I wrote as well as drew, because I was like, I want to like write things that I also want to draw. So I ended up making the Witch Boy trilogy, which is a middle grade series about magic and gender and this magical family that has very strict gender roles for like who can do what magic. And it's about a boy who breaks those rules and becomes a witch, even though that's only for girls. That was my middle grade debut. I made a graphic novel called The Girl from the Sea, which is a sapphic love story. It's teenagers. It's about a Selkie girl and a human girl. Selkies are humans who can turn into seals and back again. And so it's about her and then human girl falling in love and kind of having all these secrets come out. And I was done with that book, and it did well. It got a really good reception. I felt like I'd made this really like cute, soft, sweet, queer love story. And I was like, all right, I should probably do more of that because obviously people like that. But it's never that simple. And so for the deep dark, I was like racking my brains trying to come up with like what my next book would be and what the next story would be. And it took quite a while, but this one sort of just arrived. The characters and this basic premise of this secret that was kept under the floorboards and something that kind of needed to be fed and needed to be maintained with your blood. That felt really, really interesting to me and really vital. And it kind of explored some emotional like areas that I wanted to explore. So the book sort of came from that. I published it as a newsletter originally. I have a Substack newsletter. So I would send like basically a scene out every week. So it would be like 5 to 7 pages drawn in this long scrolling format. And that sort of ballooned and eventually, became the full story. I was sort of writing it as I was sending it out. And so I was kind of like finding where the story would go. And it had this really organic growth that my previous books had not. And once that was done, we decided to put it together as a graphic novel. It ended up being way longer than I thought it would be because I'd kind of just, again, made it in this really organic fashion. But yeah, it's been out for like two months now. And it's been really cool to sort of get the reception from it. It's, I'd say my most personal book, very much me going really deep and kind of trying to like explore some messier feelings and like not tell as neat or as clean or as easy to process of a story. So sort of trying to push myself in that way. And so, I'm like very honored that you guys did it for book club. I'm like, just really, it's been really cool to sort of hear people's responses to it because this one, I really felt like I threw it out into the world, not knowing how people would respond to it. So, yeah.
Yeah, you certainly have long been a shop favorite of ours, and The Girl from the Sea continues to, it might as well have come out 2 months ago. Like, it continues to be one of our bestsellers. So, and people still ask for it by name. So we were so excited for this new piece, which, is a lot darker and equally and wonderfully as compelling. You mentioned a little bit about sort of like the monster creature. Could you speak a little bit more to sort of like how the creation of that came to be and sort of some of those rules around feeding it blood and what that meant for Mags and her family?
Yeah. It was very like early. I knew that it was a story about something in the basement and something that took blood. And I wasn't quite sure what the creature was, what its shape was, or what its rules were for a while. I kind of started drawing the book knowing that something was down there, but not knowing exactly what it looked like. I actually hired a character or a sort of creature designer, Eli Spencer, who's this like really talented artist who I just love her illustrations. And I hired her to kind of give me a take on it because I wanted to get a little bit of like an outside influence. But it kind of like it's come to symbolize different things, and I never say exactly what it symbolizes for me because I've found that readers have really specific ideas about what it means to them, and I think they're all like right in their own way. But for me, I've always made fantasy stories. My books always have some element of magic in them, but they also always have one foot in the real world. And as I grow as an artist and as a person, I'm finding that my books have like more and more grounding in the real world and less magic. So when there is something that is kind of magical or supernatural, it's really important to me that it feels extremely grounded and extremely like physical and like something that you could maybe encounter, something that could be real. So I wanted to bring that to the creature, and both sort of, it is this kind of metaphor and it is sort of this magical thing, but it's also a physical creature that has physical needs. And so in that way, it almost could be seen to be like representing part of Mags's body, that it just is this, it has this like physical presence. So that was kind of just like that. I feel like it was sort of intuitive from there to figure out, well, this thing needs to be fed. What happens if it's not fed? and then kind of what happens if it's hurt. So figuring those rules out, I think especially that second rule, what happens if it's hurt and how is it tied to Mags? That was something I kind of started to find as I was partway through the book and sort of seeing like, all right, where is this going to end up? How is the story going to go? I had an idea that I wanted it to be injured and like maybe killed, but then I wanted it to come back. And so finding that and finding those rules of kind of like this thing that is bound to you, it kind of just all made an intuitive sense to me. I really love exploring magic in comics because you can use the visuals to like tell something. It can sort of be this very visual metaphor where I think if I had to put it in words, it might be a little more clunky or a little more obvious, but the fact that it is visuals and the fact that it's sort of a little more intuitive to understand. And I can kind of just be like, well, as long as it makes sense visually, then the magic makes sense. So that's kind of the rule that I always approach it with.
We spent a bit of time talking about the creature. Do folks have more while we're talking about it? More questions about it? Yeah.
I was wondering about the blood drinking. Does the monster have to specifically drink from Mags? Because I was thinking about that in the context of it killing the little boy at the beginning, but also with Nessa feeding it, because it changes the significance. So I was just wondering, because I thought that it was just that it could only drink from her, but now I'm thinking about it that it probably was just being caged, and that was the way of handling it.
Yeah, that was my idea, was that it probably could drink from anybody, but that it is specifically, it's kind of this thing of like, do you choose to feed it yourself or do you let it go out and like find other people to feed on and maybe like hurt them or kill them?
I was asking too about, obviously Mags is a good person, and like her Laura, ended up killing this boy early on. So like, I wasn't sure, right? There's like metaphor, there's like literally what's happening. And this is clearly a part of Mags, right? If it dies, she dies, and vice versa. But I don't view Mags as a killer, and clearly this thing that happened in her youth was not her fault. She didn't know and stuff like that. But I didn't know what the moral or ethical takeaway I was supposed to get from that either. And because, again, I don't view Mags as a bad person, but like this thing killed somebody and it was because she wanted it to hurt this person. So,
yeah.
And, we were all talking about different things that we felt like the monster could represent. But, even if it's the worst part of a person and you're feeding it, whether it's shame or something else, and, it doesn't necessarily mean that makes you a monster or that you're a killer, for example. So I wasn't sure what your thoughts on that were.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I would definitely say I don't think I have a specific ethical takeaway that I would want you to receive. I think she is responsible for his death. And so for me, a lot of this book is about exploring feelings of guilt and obligation. And so it felt like it needed this extremely weighty incident to sort of be the thing that weighs on her. So yeah, I when I was writing it, I read a lot of books and articles about actually people who had accidentally killed people or hurt people as children, and kind of looking at that experience, because it is so, there can be accidents and there's it's this sort of horrible thing that is also how do you reckon with that? And how do you be I was young and maybe scared, but I still did something that I could not take back. So yeah, I think the discomfort of that is intentional and meant to be sat with.
I think that part of that is you neglect, this part of yourself that you don't like, this, monster part of yourself, that instead of choosing maybe, like Molly said before, to feed it your blood, kind of take care of it yourself, kind of letting it fester out of sight, out of mind, but it, still kind of getting worse, and then eventually having to deal with repercussions of that. This is maybe a very, intense version of that, but that's something I kind of take away from that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's real. And I think also, it's fiction, it's not real. And so it sometimes is like exploring these things that like we may, I think probably a lot of people have things that they feel guilty about in their past. Probably like most of us are not killers, but it can feel that heavy a lot of times. And so it is sort of using the fact that it is fiction to sort of play it up and like explore, like take those feelings that I have within myself and like make them bigger. I think that is like the purpose of fiction.
At the end, that she was able to, and sort of a little bit like indirectly, a little bit directly with the help of her uncle, kind of be able to live more open with this thing. But part of me was hoping that there'd be like another way to feed the monster where it wouldn't actually have to inflict pain or harm. But like with something like this, I wasn't sure if, you know, like you said, it's fiction and everything, but I was sort of hoping that, you know, when you came to accept something like this, whether it was good, bad, just something you were ashamed of, if it was something physical that you had, if it was something personality-wise, if you came to accept it, that maybe it wouldn't still like hurt everyone, like in order to survive. But I wasn't sure. Yeah. I wasn't sure too if that was the intent. And I don't know. I know it's sort of up to our interpretation a little bit, but I was like, oh, that'd be a bummer if if it had to be, you know, always malicious no matter what, even if you like learn to cope with it better. I don't know.
Yeah, I appreciate your concern for the characters. I feel like that's very sweet. I definitely was imagining that like as it got to sort of be in the open air more and like got to experience more things, and this is sort of like going forward in the future from the end of the book, it like needs less. Like it needs, I think to me, there is something very compelling about parts of yourself that like hurt and maybe always are kind of painful, but that are still worth like loving and looking at. But I definitely in my head, I was like, there's a symbiosis that they reach that is much healthier for both of them, but it involves kind of both of them being out of the basement. Yeah.
That makes me feel better for the fictional characters. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the other side of the spectrum, I like that there's still that element of discomfort, because I was talking about earlier the fact that like to me it read almost as a disability metaphor. And obviously I don't know what you intended to write it with, but like the notion of like, yeah, no, even if you're willing to talk to people about your chronic pain and accept that that's a part of you, you're still gonna hurt, even if you are better at knowing your limits and having people help you when you need it. That doesn't go away just because you like disability pride doesn't mean that you're not chronically ill anymore. Yeah. And so I really, from the opposite side of that, appreciated that like messiness.
Thank you. That was definitely something I had in mind when I was working on it. Yeah.
We appreciated the main couple being a trans woman, butch queer couple. Can you talk about some of the decision to make the character? You said the characters kind of came to you all at once. Can you talk some about the decision to do that?
Yeah. I was, so like Go From the Sea is, I think both of the girls are pretty like femme presenting in it. And I made it, and I was like working on some animated projects that also like had very like femme presenting girls in it, and just like getting so much positive feedback for that. And I sort of ended up asking myself the question of like, why do I feel the need to do that? Especially like I have short hair. I'm very butch. Most of my friends are trans in some way, gender nonconforming. Like it is not as like that is not my lived experience to be like femmes, like femme for femme. And so I was like, why does that feel so scary to explore? So that was the challenge that I set to myself with this book. And kind of even before I knew what the story was, I was like, I know I want to do something with a butch main character, because I want to just, I don't know why I haven't done that. I don't know why I'm afraid of that. And so I want to like explore that more. So there was something so powerful about getting to like just draw someone who is genuinely like kind of looks like me, looks like a lot of my friends. And I think also getting to show her not as like, you often see sort of like masculine women presented as like, I don't know, kind of like step on me, like, wow, they're so cool and tough. And to be like, no, she's like 18, she's messed up, she's emotional and vulnerable and like has the same range of emotions as everyone else. And so to kind of express that through her. There was something just wonderfully cathartic about it. I think there's a real power to visual mediums and kind of reclaiming and like reclaiming like visuals that are often like presented as sort of being like unattractive in society. I think there's a power specifically to drawings where you can say, no, actually, I find this really beautiful. I find this compelling. I find this like main character material. So that was Mags. And with Nessa, I just have like a lot of trans women in my life that I really adore. And so I felt like I wanted to have a character like that who sort of like got to, I feel like a lot of the trans women that I know have walked that road of finding self-love, and that was like something that Mags really needed to do, to sort of learn that she deserved love and that she deserved to be alive and deserved happiness, and deserved to like look at herself and be happy with herself. And so I felt like Mags came first, and then Nessa was kind of like, who is the, you know, Mags is the moon and Nessa is the sun, like who sort of will bring that out of Mags in the best way. And I also love the idea of like knowing someone when you're a kid and like meeting them later and being like, oh, we have all these things in common that we didn't realize we had, but obviously we were drawn together at the time. Like I definitely have a lot of friends like that too. So yeah, she was really fun. And Nessa, I feel like, was very much like, she's much more plugged into like a queer community. Like Mags is very small town queer, probably wouldn't even really like use labels for herself, doesn't like really think about that stuff, doesn't have that language. Whereas Nessa is like very plugged into the community. She's like listening to Chapel Roan, like she's like living in LA and kind of living her life. And so she's, while like opening the door for Mags to like come out of her darkness and like come into like a place of love, she's also open, like holding a door open to the community and sort of being like, there's more people like us. You don't have to kind of be alone. So yeah, that was how those two came about.
Thank you for asking that question. Those were awesome answers.
Yeah, it made us really happy. This book came out around the same time as we were talking with another queer writer who had a story came out, and we were sharing with them how excited we were, and we had ordered a bunch of copies, and they were bummed with how their story had come out, and it was because they were told by their publisher they couldn't have butch lesbians as the heart of it, because the publisher was like, wow, that's a stereotype. She was like, but I'm a butch lesbian. So she was like, how can I be a stereotype? So I was like, well, I'm glad that and her story was geared towards a similar age group, so I was like, I'm glad that we can have representation. But it's interesting that they were like, yeah, you have to have two femme lesbians as the main characters, or like otherwise it's a lesbian stereotype. It's like, that's ridiculous. So
I find that so interesting, and like, I definitely don't like. I made this. I put it out as a newsletter, so I was like, I'm not taking notes on this story. Like I like ended up working with an editor, but it was pretty much finished by the time it went to my editor. So I did not give them a chance to come back to me with any notes like that. But I find it so fascinating because I think people there's this hunger for queer stories, and I think it's like, it's in the zeitgeist. I think it's like fashionable in a way to like have a lot of publishers are wanting to put out queer stories, but there is at the same time sometimes this like cringe where they don't want it to look too queer. And so it's like anything that is a little too authentic, anything that is like, you know, again, something that might be societally considered kind of unattractive or kind of against the grain. They're like, no, we don't want that. That's bad representation. That's a stereotype. And so I find that it's so frustrating and so short-sighted. So it's always cool to like, I think like, for me, it's always just about like pushing those boundaries within myself, like the walls that I put up in my own creative mind, and being like, how can I make this more true to my life, more true to my community? Yeah. Oh, that's so frustrating though. I want to fight that publisher on their behalf.
How about a question about the uncle? So you mentioned that you were sort of coming up with the story as you were writing it for the newsletter. And that first scene with the sort of tarot reading, did you know that was Max's uncle during that scene, or how did like that character develop a little bit?
Okay, it's actually like the craziest like moment of fiction writing I've ever had. because I knew really early on, I like was like writing down all these scenes, all these different like conversations basically between Mags and Nessa. And I was like, I want to have them meet a fortune teller. I want there to be a little bit more magic in the story. I want to sort of give this like information across. And in my script, I was like, fortune teller is like a white woman with lots of bracelets. And like, I wrote that. And then I started drawing it and I was like, for some reason, that's not it. Like I'm drawing this kind of much more like genderqueer kind of cowboy character. But I didn't know that it was Hugo. And I like really did not know until I was drawing the very last chapter. And I was like, all right, I have it all. Like they drive off into the sunset. They stop at the like memorial. Like I have it all, but like, what's the final image? And then it like came like, oh my God, Hugo has been there the whole time. And that was really beautiful because it was like, I think it felt like a little bit of a gift that my subconscious gave myself of like, I made this book very organically. And so I kind of had seeded that character without realizing it. But it also was sort of this evolution of like, in my mind, Hugo's character represented someone who had had a similar burden as Mags and who had kind of gone off and vanished and nobody knew what had happened to them. And they were sort of like out of the picture, basically dead. And to kind of realize like, no, it's actually so much more interesting to be like, they are here. They have a community. They're at parties. They work. They like are doing magic. They like are here. They're just like, they cannot be with their family anymore. That was really cool. So yeah, that was like a totally, probably like a once in a lifetime, like magical, like fiction thing where I was like, how did I even know to draw them to look like they're related to Mags? So yeah, that was cool. Thanks for asking about that.
I really loved the scene with Nessa and Aaron in the car. I felt like it was one of those like perfect scenes that illustrates like this, what's so cool about graphic novels where you use the art to express like a feeling in a way that words can't. And I thought that like the line work was just so beautiful and really effective in showing like how he was like not listening to her and was projecting like a cool other person on her, like it was like a television show almost. And I was just wondering, the artist, it's unlike any other part of the story, so just kind of wondering how you like came up with that scene, or if like the thought of how you would express it came first versus like the writing of the scene.
Yeah. Thank you for asking about that because I'm also really, really pleased with how that scene came out. I knew like the plot points, like I kind of like knew for most of the story we're gearing towards this ending where these three characters are in one place and Laura the monster is there as well. And I was really, as I was getting closer and closer to the scene, I was like, I don't know how to write this. Like I really like Nessa and like I feel really like upset about putting her in this situation. Like it's kind of based on a situation that I experienced. And so I was like, this is like upsetting to go back to. And as I said, I was sending it out in like scene updates. So I think that one was like 2 separate updates. And so like I would kind of, approach drawing them and just be like, okay, what's my way into the scene? And so for that one, I was really agonizing. And I realized that the way in was to like look to Aaron's perspective, and that I was so reluctant to go to that character. And I'd kind of written him as this very sort of flat, like boyfriend, villain, like ex-boyfriend. And to sort of start to be like, okay, but what is actually going on with him? What is he thinking? Obviously he is the villain of the story. I'm not like sympathizing with him, but I want to like try to empathize and try to understand. And so that was like really, really interesting as a writing exercise. And then to kind of be like, okay, how can I both show the scene from his perspective and also show how far away he is from what is actually happening. And so kind of realizing like, okay, I'm actually going to draw 2 conversations at once and like layer them on top of each other. And that so much of the book is about Mags and Nessa trying to see each other clearly and trying to kind of cut through the memories and the trauma and the like walls that Mags has put up and to see each other clearly and to be like, but this man sees Nessa, he already knows what he wants from Nessa. She's this sort of muse, this manic pixie dream girl, and he has the entire encounter already written. So he's not actually curious in her, in the moment, like in what she has to say or in her personhood. And so trying to figure out, how to like convey that through the art, it was it was really interesting. It was like really like stressful. Like it gave me nightmares the whole time I was drawing it because it was just like very emotional to go there. But I'm glad that you picked up on it. And when I was done, I was like, I hope that this reads the way I want it to, because but the way you described it is exactly it, that he's sort of projecting this vision that is not really happening. So yeah, again, just like I love comics so much. So getting to explore things like that and explore point of view and perspective and really sort of be like, who is this scene? Whose eyes is it happening through? That was really cool to get to explore.
That was like the most effective way I've ever seen like that kind of.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I ask what you're most proud of from this book? Other than the fact that it exists in this beautiful, exceptional tome, which I have to say, given that it came out sort of episodically, the pacing is amazingly well done and smooth. You would never know that it was released that way. It reads exceptionally well and quickly. I think almost all of us were saying we devoured it in like one sitting. So.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the things we talked about, I am really proud of that scene with the car. I feel like I explored some new, like, I think comics is this very unexplored medium. Like, we really are just beginning to tap into like what graphic novels, what kind of stories we can tell with them, and like what we're capable of. So I'm always trying to sort of push the boundaries and experiment in a way that still feels really legible and really cinematic to readers, and it could bring in even people who are not familiar with graphic novels. So there's a couple scenes. I think that one, there's a scene where Mags's abuela's in the hospital and like her vision is getting narrower and narrower that I was really proud of. I was really proud of how I used color in it. There were just a lot of like, every choice was sort of trying to figure out how to like have the biggest emotional impact. And so I am proud of like, I've been hearing from people that like it was successful in that way, which is really cool, because you sometimes just work on these things for so long by yourself and sort of are like, does any of this make sense? Is any of this working? So yeah, I think having it in physical form, I'm also proud of it being really long. Always kind of wanted a book that could be potentially used as a murder weapon. So that was my goal.
I was curious about so the black fog, for lack of a better word to describe it. It pops up in a couple of scenes. To me, for a moment, I was like, yes, pots. We're gassing out. But there's like a couple of moments where it almost looks like Magnus Abuela is like breathing it out, and I wasn't sure if they were one and the same, or if I was just picking up on something that was intended to be a background detail. But I was curious if you had anything like particular in mind when you were drawing like that fog.
Oh, that's so interesting. I hadn't actually connected like that with like, because I feel like I do it. I use things like that in comics to sort of indicate like grumpiness or like coughing or kind of like bad vibes coming out. Like I've used it in other work as well. So I like expanded it to really like cover, Mags like being very like emotionally and physically drained, and sort of these times where she passes out. But yeah, I think it's an expansion of that kind of comics language. And there is something so powerful, especially I found that when people read comics, like their eyes always go to the words, usually words first, and then faces and eyes, especially like that's kind of where your eye goes as the reader. And so anytime you can obscure that with blackness, like obscure the text or obscure a face, it has this like almost very emotional feeling, like a physical feeling. So yeah, that was kind of my thought going into that.
It did have a very physical feeling with the passing out. Like you said, I kind of immediately knew the feeling, right, where you're like getting really dizzy and you're going down. I was like, oh no, stand down.
It's like my vision has looked like that.
Exactly.
I stand up too fast, and that is what it looks like.
Yeah. Same.
This isn't a question, but I read this book while I was traveling, and I finished it and then immediately watched Love Lies Bleeding, that new Kristen Stewart film, and I felt like the fact that they came out so close together, I was like, it's just like the zeitgeist is this, but like, yeah, like it's the desert, but like this one was so much sweeter in the end. Like Love Lies Bleeding ended, and I was like, I don't like how that made me feel, but I really, really adored how this book made me feel, and felt like it. We talked a lot about what different, like how we felt the monster was. We felt it was different. It represented different things for each of us, and I just really appreciated that we all had very singular experiences with this book, and I don't feel like that happens very often.
Thank you so much. That truly means the world. I also love that film.
And your two leads are really good. I mean, they're like such a good beating heart for the story.
I
It's
might
like-
be a little along with this myself.
Yeah, with both of them, they're like very good leads. So.
I also just want to shout out using the Muppets as a queer romantic subplot device because that rings true.
I have watched the Muppets Christmas Carol
Yeah.
movie so many times. I was like, this is for me right now.
Like, the Muppets are for all.
It's a classic.
Like my grandmother.
Yeah, this also isn't a question. My brain is a mush. I don't have much coherent to say, but I did just love this book and found it very effective. Very affecting. I said my brain was mush. And yeah, it touched me a lot, made me cry. And thank you so much for making it.
Thank you, guys.
Molly, are you able to share any information about any upcoming projects you might have?
Yeah, right now I'm doing a very silly thing, which is also on my newsletter, which is it's ostertag.substack.com. I'm like reading all of the original Sherlock Holmes stories and doing gay little comics to accompany them. So that's kind of, I'm like, I have like a couple ideas for new books, but I'm sort of allowing myself to like do this like silly fan fiction project. So that is what I'm doing right now.
I love it. We literally just, like, last week had someone who was like, Sherlock Holmes has entered the public domain. Where are my gay Sherlock Holmes comics? So now I
Working on
exactly
it.
now I know where to send them.
Which is your favorite of the Sherlock Holmes, either the short stories or the novels? I went through like a phase where I had to read them all in one go. So
Yeah.
I'm like genuinely curious. I like ranked them all. I got like really into it for a short period of time. Yeah. So
Oh my God, I love that. Okay. I feel like Hound is like the best story, best novel. So good, so classic.
Agreed, you're right.
Yeah. And then I think Illustrious Client is my favorite short story because it's like Little Hurt Comfort. We have like a Victorian woman going on revenge, throwing acid in a man's face. There's some Dorian Gray references. It's very good. I love the blackmailer one, Charles Augustus Milverton. Could talk about this forever.
You named like my top two right in there. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun going through them and then seeing them get modernized. So I'll have to like look for your gay commentary. That's awesome.
You should look it up. It's very, I did a ton of research into like queerness at that time period. I think I think whatever my next like proper book will be, it will be something with that because I just got really, really interested in like Victorian era queerness. I found that it had a lot of parallels to the world right now and like the way queerness is being talked about right now. So it's been really interesting to have that like connection to historical queers. So yeah.
Have you been reading any comics or graphic novels lately that you've been loving?
I have been mostly in a novel place right now, but I think one that I would recommend that you guys might not have read is Emily Carroll's newest book, A Guest in the House. Looking
Yeah, we did that for our
recognition.
horror book club.
Oh, okay, good.
About a year.
Amazing. Yeah,
So good.
E.M. Carroll is amazing. We are huge fans.
Yes.
Yeah, excited to see what they're going to do with 23rd Street Books now that they're,
Yes.
and also Distillery. Yeah, they're going to do some stuff with Distillery, which is wild. So with Becky Cloonan, which I would trust her with anything. So that sounds
Yeah.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, we are big fans.
Wonderful.
Do you have any questions for us? You definitely don't have to, but if you do,
I think I'm good. But I am just so honored to be invited, and like I love hearing that it meant something different to all of you, and it's thank you so much for your questions because they were very thoughtful, and I love talking about this book. It's really close to my heart. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Molly. We are so excited to have you here and to get to talk with you. Yeah, this book was outstanding, and as some folks mentioned, it meant a lot to all of us in very different ways. So thank you for writing such a beautiful book and illustrating such a gorgeously illustrated book.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night, guys.
You too.
Thank you.
I just realized it's a rainbow. I got really excited halfway through. I was like, it's a rainbow.